when you used QCA, you already had a sense, you have to have a sense of the information from the interviews in order to build the model in the first place. Did any of your results really surprise you? What did it kind of help you see that you couldn't see just through regular?
They did, and in fact I can pull it back up here. So we hypothesized that whether they were in a charter school or a traditional public school would really make a difference, because we heard over and over and over again in interviews, well, I was lucky, I was placed in a charter school. That was a frequent quote that we coded for, as opposed to, oh, well, my friend in the program, he was placed in a traditional public school. His experience was much harder, right? And they really, or after the charter school they went off, they seem to oftentimes go off and work at for a charter agency or charter management organization. We thought that charter placement would really be a part of it. We also thought that when we were originally hypothesizing about conditions, we had a lot of other conditions that we thought would be in place or would also be predictive. Now, something about QCA is you can throw as many conditions in as you can, but it's just like all analyses, it's just going to make your analysis really complicated. So there was also some sort of early attempts to sort of see if we could see any conditions. But certain things didn't pop up. And we thought, and so we had to interpret that as well. And in the forthcoming paper on this, we talk about how charter placement, which seems so profound in people's reflections on their experience, it didn't surface anywhere as being linked with our outcome, and we suspect it's because Teach for America didn't begin placing its recruits in charters until somewhat more recently. So all of our alumni who went through the program for the first 15 years, for example, we had a lot of cases of people who were never had the option to be in a charter or a traditional public school context, for example. So it actually wasn't as strong of a pattern as we thought it was. And I think that oftentimes happens when I'm coding sometimes, I walk away with the impression that something that I keep hearing must be, the strength of it must be stronger than it actually is, or the intensity of that pattern must be stronger than it is, or it must actually also be linked with other outcomes, when in fact this helped us kind of disentangle it. So there were some surprises. That's the biggest one of this list. We've been looking at this data set in all different ways. There were others as well. I think the other thing that it does when you're thinking about, or when you said, well, what does it tell you that you might not have just known anyway, just from your coding, is that it helped us look across multiple patterns and sort of see how often different combinations, for example, this one, in traditional coding, we could have looked and said, okay, we can construct through rigorous means, we can construct a narrative that explains how these 4 conditions really were linked up with this in an individual case or with several cases. But we don't have a way to tell that story across 89 cases or whatever it is. This helps us reduce those narratives into a place where we can show our readers that it's not just us highlighting these illustrative examples. We can reduce it in a way that readers can then see the sort of the strength of those patterns. Does that answer your question?
I'm just kind of struggling to understand how that might be different from the way a quantitative researcher would approach having identified the same kinds of conditions and then constructed a regression.
Yeah. Well, then you're looking
which might
at
belie my lack of understanding of quantitative research, or.
And then we know that there's an interaction effect, but we don't know what is just correlated. We don't know which variable is just correlated with another variable in a regression. Right? So we have multicollinearity. We have a chance of multicollinearity. We don't know where those correlations. They're hidden essentially in that regression. It's hard for you to pinpoint which variables are correlated. Here you can actually see it. There it's fuzzy. It's left, an inferential statistician is going to have to say, okay, well, we know that there's some correlation here. We don't know exactly where it is. Here, you can spell it out.
In other words, this represents a certain number of individuals who had those,
and that's,
who were in that pathway,
yes.
who had all of those things as opposed to on average.
And the other thing is, if you're looking at some point, and for those of you who have looked at who have engaged in your coding at some point, after a certain number of cases, it becomes difficult to present those findings in a manageable way that's easy to interpret for the reader. I think you can go up to 30, you can go up to 40 interviews easily in certain qualitative analyses. Once it gets to a certain point, it becomes more difficult, I think, to present those patterns in an easily digestible format for somebody. So this also reduces what you're doing on a case-by-case basis anyway in qualitative data.